So today on Lessons from an Old Quilt, we're going to look at this quilt. And this is a traditional fan quilt pattern, but there's a lot of things about this quilt that are not traditional. Before we get started though, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance. Thank you for joining me. So this quilt was purchased at a yard sale for $12. The woman said her aunt made it. I tried to talk her into keeping it. She said she didn't have the space for it. Kind of sad, but it happens. And I did get, I know, a steal on this quilt because it is quite large. It's 66.5 by 87 inches. It's super heavy and it's so unusual because of the fabric. So the fabric in this quilt is polyester, at least in the quilt top, I should say. The only way I can describe it is the 1970s polyester fabrics that you know, they made pants out of, okay, at Kmart. Like you'd buy them, this super thick, heavy, scratchy, hot polyester fabric. That's what's in this quilt top. I know as a kid I had a brown pantsuit that my mother always put me in that was made of this fabric, and it just was uncomfortable and stretchy and just not a nice fabric. The whole quilt top is made of that. And there's some other surprises. So let's take a closer look and see what we can learn from this unusual quilt. Okay, this quilt is a stunner and it is so amazing. Anyway, so this quilt, let's talk about the fabrics first. It is made up of polyester, like I mentioned. Every piece on the top of this is polyester. So we're not talking about something that maybe is easy to work with, which makes this quilt even more spectacular in my eyes because can you imagine? I don't know that I would have been brave enough to make this quilt. So each of the fan blocks is a machine piece. So you can see if you peek inside the seams, you can see that they are in fact machine pieced, each of the fan blades, and even these curves are machine pieced. Now, the polyester, of course, we know, if you've worked with polyester before, is extremely stretchy. This either helped or hurt the maker, and I would love to know which it was because I don't know how the maker stabilized this fabric well enough to get these wonderful curves that are pretty perfect, if you ask me. So each of these fans, and there are 63 fans, so our block size is about 10 by 10. Again, it stretches, so they're not exactly identical, but holy cow, this maker really did a great job. So each of these blocks is mostly made up of two colors, and for the most part, with the exception of like 10 blocks, they are solids. So we see that here with the dark blue and the light blue. All of them, however, have this white background. And that fabric seems to be consistent throughout. So let me show you what I mean by most of them. So we do have a few blocks, which this one happens to be one of my favorites here. And it is made up of 3 different fabrics, which I think looks like a sunrise or something. I think it's just a really neat block. And then we have ones that are made up of print fabrics, and there's about 10 of these, and you can see this, but again, they are all polyester, and it just adds like this interest and this pop. We see this particular fabric repeated once in another block, which is, let's see if I can find it, up here. And then we have this really cool block that of course is made up of 3 different fabrics. So it's a neat quilt, and it is all hand quilted, so it's machine piece but hand quilted, and this is like a scratchy type of polyester, so I can't imagine sitting in hand quilting. However, I'm sure it would needle well. I'm sure you could get through it with a needle pretty easily. So it's just a really neat classic block with an unexpected fabric. I love that. So let's look at the back, because again, we're seeing some more unexpected stuff on the back. So if I flip this over, you can see the quilt lines. The batting is a thinner batting, and you can even see how fabrics, you can see the fabrics through. Hopefully you can see that on camera. I'll try to get a close-up of that. You can see the fabrics coming through, or the shadowing of the colors of the fabrics, but I think that just adds interest. That also tells me it was a very thin batting. There definitely is a batting in here. There aren't any holes for me to peek in like I usually do, so I can't see for sure what it is, but there definitely is something. And the quilting is just done beautifully. This fabric was seamed down the middle, and oddly, it was seamed by hand. Another interesting fact. Not sure what happened there, but hey, you know, that's the way it goes. Maybe it was finished later, which we've speculated before. So you can see the wonderful quilting in the fans, and you also can see that the plaid is straight. Now let's talk about this backing. It looks like a flannel on camera. It is not a flannel, however. It is a homespun. Now homespun is a thinner fabric, and I have a piece here. Hopefully you can see this. It's a thinner fabric and it's a woven, so it frays a lot. I actually don't like working with homespun, but a lot of people do. And you can see it's just a thin fabric. Now, using a thin fabric like this was brave because the top is so heavy. So I'm not sure if it was a choice because of this is what the maker had, or if it was because the top was so heavy, the maker wanted to put something light on the back. I'm not sure exactly, but it's neat nonetheless, and it's so unexpected because it's so different than the front. So the binding, we'll discuss that. Just like we've seen in most other quilts, the binding was pulled around from the back to the front, and it was hand tacked down. So that's not really unusual with the older quilts. You can see even the corners. It's just the way it was finished. And it's a neat quilt. I have washed it. It is so durable and easy to wash because it is polyester, and it washed up well. There were a few stains, but for the most part they came out. I think I found one other stain that I couldn't get out, but overall it is a spectacular quilt and really just a neat example of making do with what you have. So lessons that we can learn. There's so many things we can take away from this quilt. It's a really cool find, in my opinion, at least. The first thing is add some of those surprises, like those print fabrics just kind of make this quilt because, you know, although the solid fabrics are very modern looking, with the colors at least, you know, what we're seeing a lot of with the Kona fabrics, but then you have these pops of prints. And I would love to see a modern quilt made that way now. Wouldn't that be cool? With all of a sudden you see a pop of a print mixed in there. And I'm sure there are quilts out there like that. I just haven't seen them, and I don't know, maybe I should make one, but I don't know. But that's just something I think we need to think about, is that unexpected touch that sometimes just adds that extra interest to our quilts. The next thing we can learn from this quilt is to be brave. I can't imagine working with this fabric. First of all, I can't imagine even hand quilting through this fabric because it's not super nice to touch. But this maker was really brave with it and took a block that has curved piecing and made this quilt out of it, or the quilt top at least. And I'm just flabbergasted by that because I can't imagine me being brave enough to use this type of fabric. And I think I need to be braver and maybe get out of my own comfort zone, just like this maker might have. Maybe this maker was used to using this fabric, I'm not sure, but I think it's important for us learning from this quilt to get out of our comfort zone and maybe try some different techniques with different types of fabrics. And finally, the last thing we can learn from this has to do with the quilting. This shadow quilting, or the quilting pattern, I think really adds interest in it. Makes almost like the fans look a little bigger than they are, and just that echoing the quilting lines from the pattern sometimes just is a nice touch with these quilts. And I also love that this maker used white thread. In the backgrounds where it's white, it blended in, but in the areas where it's a solid fabric, or even some of those cool print fabrics, it stands out. And I love that touch. I think it's just a really well constructed quilt, especially considering the challenges the maker probably had with it. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt. I hope you enjoyed seeing this traditional fan quilt done in non-traditional fabrics. I can't wait to share more with you. I have a really cool acid green quilt coming up that I love. I bought off of eBay. And I have another quilt that's baskets that I bought off of Facebook Marketplace. So I have a few different ones coming up, and I can't wait to share them. Have a great week. Make sure you take some time to sew, and I'll see you soon. Bye.